with me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the 2020 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series where your man Louie T aims to break down all 32 teams in the National Football League's 2020 NFL Draft using our brand new grading scale. Each pick will receive a grade from 5 to 1, 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. We'll tally up all of those scores, divide by the number of picks, which will yield us an overall grade for that team's draft. We'll then move on to the next team in the series picked by you. That's right, you, the viewer out there, are in total control as this is the You Pick format. Simply be the first to leave a comment in the comment section of this and future videos stating two things: the phrase next and the team you'd like to see next. Some examples: Bills Mafia next, Buffalo, next. You get where I'm going with this. As a matter of fact, the next team up in the series is none other than the Buffalo Bills. And nobody, and I mean nobody, makes the playoffs like the Buffalo Bills. Hey, that's a change from past years, all right? Where it used to be nobody misses the playoffs like the Buffalo Bills, but they're heading in a different direction, are the Buffalo Bills. And I said this when I did the Colts video. I'm regurgitating it again here because I feel that way. Two of my favorite GMs, two guys that are really becoming my favorite GMs in football are the Indianapolis Colts GM, Chris Ballard, and the Buffalo Bills general manager, Brandon Beane. They understand. They're young guys. They get it. They understand team and organizational building. They understand how to construct a roster. And essentially, both of them had to do it from the ground up. In India, it was a little different. When Ballard came in, he still had Andrew Luck, but there wasn't a lot around Andrew Luck. And then he didn't have Andrew Luck, and they still have a very formidable roster that they continue to add to in Indianapolis. In Buffalo, it was essentially a build from the ground up type of situation. They brought in Sean McDermott. They changed the whole philosophy of this organization and this football team. They came in with a different mindset, and they built this team in the image of McDermott and Brandon Beane, and they really have done a great job of just building this thing brick by brick by brick by brick. It started with Tyrod Taylor and that mentality of, hey, we can win ball games. It wasn't usually pretty. It still isn't all that aesthetically pleasing at times in Buffalo, but a win's a win's a win in the National Football League, and the Bills had enough of them last year to qualify for the postseason and should have won on the road at Houston. Part of the reason they weren't able to do that was because they didn't have enough offensive firepower. They were up in that game at halftime into the third quarter, and you were saying to yourself, this feels like a 35-3 type of ass whooping that should be being handed out at this point and in progress. And instead they were up like by 17 or something like that. Some minuscule score. I can't quite remember what it was, but it left the door slightly ajar for the Houston Texans. And they were able to come back and ultimately win that football game in overtime. And because of the lack of weaponry, because of the lack of firepower, you knew they needed to go back to the drawing board and add some more pieces to the puzzle. Well, they've done that. The Bills were one of 7 teams that did not have a first-round pick in 2020, but that was for a really good reason. I talked about the lack of firepower. Well, they go out and they add a guy that can come in and automatically become their number 1 wide receiver in Stefon Diggs. Had to give up a first-round pick to do so. Well worth the first-round pick if you ask me. Now Josh Allen has all the requisite parts he needs. I thought that they were still missing a big wide receiver. And I liked Duke Williams, and I thought he did some really good things in that postseason game versus the Texans. But I still looked at that group and said, look, you got all of these really talented receivers, whether you're talking about John Ross or you're talking about Cole Beasley, and now you're talking about Stefon Diggs. You're talking about 3 guys that can get you damn near 1,000. And in the case of Diggs and Ross, they've achieved 1,000-yard seasons in their career. So you're talking about guys that can get you right around 1,000 yards, but you don't have a big guy. All of them are smaller, diminutive receivers. And so I said, you need a big 6'3", 6'4 target. Well, the Bills heard me loud and clear, and that's why I love Brandon Beane, because he seems to get it. He understands what this team needs. Not to mention, they could use another back, because old man Frank, or Forever Frank, as I like to call him, no longer in Buffalo, needed to replace him and his production. And so they did that. And I said, you could use some edge rushing help. You know, you got some guys and you went out in free agency and brought in a guy from Carolina, and they seem to do that. Brought in Josh Norman as well, some guys that McDermott is familiar with to help you off the edge. And you still have a guy that's been rushing for you for quite some time, that's been putting up some quality numbers over the years. But, you know, those guys are getting up there in age. So I'm like, you could use an edge rusher as well. You've spent so much resources on the interior of your defensive line. Now you could use some help on the outside, off the edges, and you did that in the draft. So I thought it was a complete draft for the Bills, kind of handling everything that they needed. And then you got a surprise in there at the quarterback position. Let's take a look at what Brandon Beane was able to accomplish in the 2020 NFL draft as we take a look at this draft class. All 7 selections made by the Bills in this draft. You see them in front of you. We're going to break each and every single one of them down. I've got the breakdowns and the write-ups for each of those players right here in front of me. I will be reading from them as we start in the second round of the draft. Remember, Bills had no first round selection. 54th overall pick. Edge rusher, defensive end, defensive lineman, whatever you want to call him. He's more of a defensive end. A.J. Epineza out of Iowa is the selection. 6'5", 275 pounds, 34.5-inch arms, 14.5 tackles for loss, 11.5 of them sacks, 4 forced fumbles, 3 pass breakups in 2019, 36.5 career tackles for loss, 26.5 of them sacks, 9, count them, 9 forced fumbles. That is a robust number to go along with a whopping 8 pass breakups, another big time number, and a block kick in his career. So this is a guy ultra productive in the Big Ten for the Iowa Hawkeyes. I had a first round grade on him. I thought that was one of the travesties of the first round, and not only one of the travesties of the first round, but really this guy didn't go till the late stages of the second round, So to me, this is extreme value because what teams tend to do, they fall in love with the pass rushers that are dynamic and elite and can bend the edge, and they've got blazing get off, and the first 2 steps are lightning quick, and that's cute, and all of that glitter and glam and all of that eye-popping, raw talent, that's great, and there were guys like that in this draft. Obviously, Chase Young going number 1 or 2 overall to the Redskins. Calebon Chason is another guy with that kind of ability, but that wasn't A.J. Epineza, and I think he was punished for that. And when you look at certain guys, you say, that guy knows how to win. He knows how to get to the quarterback. And I just felt like that should have been enough to get him into the first round, but it wasn't. And you benefit from it. I had him as my second defensive end in the draft behind Chase Young, and he went second overall if you're talking defensive ends. Now, you're talking edge rushers. He was down the list. But he's not an edge rusher. He's not a guy that can stand up in a 2-point stance. He's a hand in the dirt, 3-point stance type of guy. And so, you look at A.J. Epineza, and I think this is tremendous value. I'll give you my comp for him a little bit later on. A good size and proportional build. When you look at his frame at 6'5", 275 with 34.5-inch arms, that's a tremendous build. That's exactly what you're looking for. That's kind of statuesque. Not necessarily from the physique. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But when you're talking about a guy and how he's shaped and molded, 6'5", 275 with 34.5-inch arms is pretty much how you draw it up. Length. He's, again, I talked about that with the arms, 34, and he uses them well. He understands leverage. He understands the length game, and we'll talk about that here shortly. Technically sound and savvy. Again, this is where he differentiates himself from a lot of the pass rushers in this draft, is that he's just technically sound and he's savvy and he understands the art of pass rushing. He knows how to set guys up. He knows how to lull them to sleep and then beat them. And so there's something to that. There's something you can't ignore when you see the numbers that he's putting up. There's a reason he's putting up these numbers, and it's not like he's playing in the WAC. He's not playing in the Mountain West Conference, all right? He's not playing in the AAC, okay? He's playing in the Big Ten. Usually you're seeing 2 or 3 big-time offensive tackles coming out of this conference year in, year out. And he's going against these guys every single year, and he's putting up numbers. So I just think he gets it. Black belt hand usage. And to me, that's where he excels and separates himself, is his hands and his length and the way that he uses both of them in tandem to help him win, shorten the edge, get to the quarterback. Move Rolodex is absolutely loaded, okay? All right, his toolbox is full of very crafty tools that he knows how to use and pull out at just the right time. You might as well call him Handy Manny, all right? Like, he's got a toolbox full of tools, knows how to use them. You're talking about a SWAT where he knocks down the hands of the tackle and is able to turn the corner. You're talking about a latch and snatch. That's one of my favorite moves. One of the moves I think is the most underrated, that not enough guys understand just how powerful and potent a latch and snatch is. Where you grab the lineman, you shake him up, and then you pull him, and that propels you towards your target, whether that's the running back or the quarterback. You're thrusting yourself forward. It's like you're giving yourself a head start. I don't understand why more guys don't do it. I mean, I get it. If you don't have 34, 35-inch arms, it's a lot tougher to do. But if you fire your hands first and you get there first and you're able to latch on first, you can do it. So I don't understand why more guys don't. He's got a crossover, and normally crossovers are reserved for guys with elite quickness and dynamic ability. But if you understand how to set tackles up, you too can have a crossover, and he does. And then he's got a swim move. So there's a bevy of moves here that he can pull out and be successful with, and that's part of the reason why I thought this guy was a first-round pick. Stack and shed capability. I don't really think he attacks the run game as aggressively as I would like him to, and I don't think he affects the game from the standpoint of a run defender. I mean, listen to his tackles for loss, 14 and a half of them in 2019, but only 3 of them were non-sacks. So what I'm telling you is he's not really impacting the run game as much as you would like him to, at least not on the opposite side of the line of scrimmage, but nonetheless, he is able to set a physical edge. Versatility to move inside on passing downs. I think this is and this is something that you get in the AJ Epineza package that not a lot of people talked about. They used him in Iowa as an interior rusher on obvious passing downs. You want to get a guy that's maybe not good on first and second down, not stout and adept at stopping the run, but you know this guy can get to the quarterback. You know, Jerry Hughes and all these guys that you have on the outsides. You want as many of those guys on the field, many of those pass rushers on the field on third down, right? So what you do is you take an AJ Epineza and you kick him, you reduce him inside, all right, as a 3-tech, and you allow him to rush there, all the while getting more pass rushers on the field. Let's say you got AJ Epineza on first and second down outside as a 4 technique playing defensive end, and all of a sudden now you want him to go after the quarterback. You kick him inside so you can bring another guy in that you feel like has some rush potential. You know, maybe you want to bring down the ex-Virginia Tech product from inside linebacker to now you want him to rush the quarterback on 3rd and 9. Well, now you kick AJ Epineza inside. It gives you another guy that can rush, and AJ is just as effective inside as he is outside. So I love that versatility that he brings to the table. Playmaker, this is a guy that just seems to step up on the biggest stages when the game is at its most critical point. AJ Epineza is a guy that just steps up, and I love that. That's when I want to see my best players come and play their best ball, is when games on the line, critical moments. You watch him against Minnesota, he closes the show in that game. You watch him against Wisconsin on the road, they lost that game, but he was huge in that game. Down the stretch, when they needed big stops, AJ Epineza making big plays down the stretch to give his team a chance. That's what I want. Guys that know how to close. You know, Von Miller's best attribute is when the game's on the line and his team needs a big pressure. Von Miller usually provides that and closes the show. Same thing with Aaron Donald. The elite guys know when to say when it's that time for them to step up and make a play. I feel like AJ Epineza has that. The forced fumbles speak to that. 9 forced fumbles in his career. That means he's not only getting to the quarterback, he's getting the football out. That means for every 3 sacks, he's forcing a fumble. Think about that for a second, man. All right, and then 8 pass breakups. I mean, guys, I don't understand how guys don't, and I've said this before, if you've got 33-inch arms or longer and you're 6'4" or better, I don't understand how you're not batting down multiple footballs per season. I just don't understand how a guy can go his entire career, not have a PBU, and you're 6'5" with 34-inch arms. It just doesn't make any sense. So to see 8 PBUs, it brings a huge smile to my face because he absolutely gets it. I'm not going to get there on every play. On every snap where I'm rushing the quarterback, I'm not going to get there. There are going to be some 3-step drops where they're getting it out quick, and I'm never going to have a shot to get there. There's some opportunities where I just get blocked on the play. Whatever the case may be, I can still have an impact on this play. Let me get my hands up. He understands that. And then productivity, I've already went through the numbers. His productivity was off the charts. And you kind of know what you're getting. And that's why it's so disappointing to see guys like A.J. Epineza be penalized because he's not the greatest athlete. There are numbers here, and there are things that he does that tells you that this translates to the next level. So I think, again, you're benefiting from this. You get to his weaknesses, slow to react to runs and shed defenders. I don't think I said this already, so I'm not going to harp on it, but I don't think he impacts the run game as effectively and as critically as I think he can. I think he's a little too lax on rundowns. I think he kind of uses that to get his win back. And I think he needs to be a little bit more effective against the run. I think he can be, and I think he needs to be moving forward. Not an explosive edge rusher, lacks real speed rush. That's why when I talked about his move Rolodex and all the moves that were in there, I didn't mention speed rush. I don't know if you caught that, because there isn't a real speed rush, and that's okay, because that's not his thing. And you know what's funny is that a tackle doesn't have to worry about speed rush with A.J. Epineza, but he can beat you in so many ways, in a variety of ways, that's the least of your worries, okay? You should be worried about your hands getting smacked down, or him beating you with quick hands, swimming past you and beating you to the inside, or setting you up with an outside, move, because he's beat you to the outside by slapping down your hands. So now you're opening up your hips a little sooner to try to combat that. Now he swim moves inside and he's got you. Now you don't know if he's going inside or outside, and now he comes with a bull rush. And so there's so many different things that he can do, or he comes with a latch and snatch. Has to do a better job of controlling runs to the outside of him. Because he doesn't have elite speed, you can't allow runs to spill outside of you. You've got to spill everything inside. Once runs get outside of him and he loses contain, he's not going to be able to catch up with that running back. Too many times I saw guys be able to turn the corner on an edge that was supposed to be set by A.J. Epineza, spilling that run back to his help inside. Instead, guys were able to outrun his angle or be able to get outside of his contain. And then when he's able to get off of that block, it's too late. He can't chase that running back down. He doesn't have enough juice to be able to do so. This is a guy that excelled at multiple sports in high school, including basketball and track and field. So this is a guy that has a background that lends itself to him being successful at the NFL game. Stepped up in games that mattered most. 5.5 sacks versus 4 ranked teams on the schedule. I talked about him stepping up and playing his best ball against some of his best opponents, and that's some of the most critical junctures of the game. Also, 2.5 sacks versus USC in the bowl game, and those came against a first-round pick in Austin Jackson, who he just absolutely abused and mutilated in that football game. So I love A.J. Epineza. I honestly don't know how he lasted to pick 54. Yes, I do. The NFL kind of frowns upon guys like him, but I think he's going to really benefit from where he's going in Buffalo. And I love this selection for the Bills. Second round, 54th pick overall, edge rusher out of Iowa. A.J. Epineza for me is a 5. Obviously, I love this selection. I love where he landed, and I think he's going to make the league pay for passing on him in the first round. As we get to the next selection in this Bills draft, third round, 86th overall selection, 8th running back out of Utah, Zach Moss is the pick. 5'9", 223 pounds, ran a 4.7 flat 40, and I thought that was going to hurt him more than it did, and I'm glad to see that it didn't. Let me say something interesting here before I break down Zach Moss. I think there's always going to be this comparison to the careers, and it's hard to compare a defensive lineman and an edge rusher and a running back. But because you took Zach Moss in the third round, I'm not comparing J.K. Dobbins to Zach Moss. I'm comparing J.K. Dobbins and his production in this league to that of A.J. Epineza, because you had a chance to pull the trigger on J.K. Dobbins at 54 if you wanted him. You passed on him, and I think you did the right thing, to be honest with you, because you needed the edge rusher more so than the running back. You got a guy in Devin Singletary. You needed a complement to him. I would have liked to have seen you get someone with some speed to offset the fact that Devin Singletary isn't a burner, but Zach Moss is a do-it-all type of back. He just has to stay healthy. So that's something I wanted to put into the back of your brain, is that I'm always going to be looking at the production of J.K. Dobbins in Baltimore and A.J. Epineza in Buffalo, because you could have had J.K. Dobbins, and if your running back position is lackluster, and I don't think it will be, honestly speaking, but if it's lackluster and you're missing a feature back, you could have had J.K. Dobbins. That being said, I love this selection of Zach Moss. 235 carries for 1,416 yards and 15 scores to go along with 28 receptions, 388 yards receiving, and 2 scores in 2019. For his career, 712 rushes for over 4,000 yards and 37 touchdowns to go along with 66 grabs for 685 yards and 3 scores in 45 total games. I had an early day 3 grade on Zach Moss, a 4th round selection. So went a little bit earlier than I thought he was going to. And honestly speaking, I gave him that grade because of the 40. I thought teams were going to ding him because of that 4.7. Again, I'm happy to see that they didn't, because this guy does everything really, really well. Nothing great, but everything really well. I had him as my 9th running back in this draft. He was the 8th running back taken. So right around where I thought he should come off the board. Strengths, patience, is tremendous. He sets things up, does a great job of allowing things to develop before then finally exploding. And the old adage is slow to the hole, explode through the hole. And so he's a guy that's slow to the hole to let things develop, and then he explodes through the hole. And that patience really pays off. He's got tremendous vision. One of the better backs in terms of vision in this draft. He just sees things before they happen, sets them up, and then able to cut off of the blocks and kind of string things together. And next thing you know, he's coming out the other side off to the races. He does a really good job with his vision. One of the better pass pro backs in this draft as well. Does a quality job on 3rd downs of protecting the quarterback. And if you want to see the field early in your NFL career as a running back, the fastest way to do that is to be able to protect on 3rd downs. He can do that. Receiving ability, again, in today's NFL, you're seeing the advent of the 3-down back now, where once upon a time, it was okay if you were a 1st and 2nd down, downhill thumper, a guy that didn't really catch it well, didn't pass protect well. Adrian Peterson is a great example of that. For years, they had a 3rd down back, especially for him, so that he could come off the field on 3rd downs, and he wasn't atypical in that sense. Most guys that were 1st and 2nd down bruisers and workhorses had a 3rd down back to spell them. That's no longer the case now. Teams are looking for guys that can do it all. They want multiple 3-down backs. Yeah, they're still the change of pace guy, but they want guys that on all 3 downs can affect the game. And so Zach Moss is one of those guys, can come in right away, give you some pass pro, catch it out of the backfield, and obviously can run the football. Really good contact balance. I've told you this numerous times that when I look at running backs, one of the first things I want to see is what your contact balance is. Yeah, I'd like you to run really fast, and that's great. But, you know, I want you to have really good vision. But above all else, what I really want to see is contact balance, because that tells me what you're going to be at the next level, because guys are going to hit you. You know, you're not at Utah anymore. You're not playing against Oregon State. You're not going to rush for 178 yards because guys are just not at an NFL caliber level. You're now playing against big boys that are athletically gifted, that are going to put their body on you. They're going to put pads and hands on you. Can you stay on your feet despite a guy coming at your knees? Can you stay on your feet despite a safety coming at you at 19 miles an hour and hitting you with a physical shoulder but not wrapping up? Can you find a way to keep your feet? Zach Moss can do that. Yards after contact. I just talked about the contact balance. So with contact balance comes yards after contact. Some of the best backs in the league, Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, just to name a few, are very dominant in the contact balance department, which yields you yards after contact. And to me, that's a huge stat in this league. Quickness. This is a guy that, again, quicker than fast. That's the mantra when you talk about a back like Zach Moss. Not going to burn anybody, not going to hit a ton of home runs, although if you fall asleep behind the wheel, he can hit a home run, but he's more of a doubles guy, the occasional triple, and he's quicker than fast. So he can set things up, use his quickness to exploit a hole and get to the second level. His weakness is lack of explosion. All right. Again, Not the most dynamic guy. That's not why you're selecting him here. You're selecting him for the entire package that he brings to the table. Sometimes he's too patient. I talked about his patience and how I love that, in this whole phenomenon that Le'Veon Bell has started with guys being extremely patient at the line of scrimmage and allowing things to develop. That's cool if you have a line that's going to allow you to do that. And if you have the burst and acceleration to take advantage of that. And Zach Moss has a lot of that. But at the same time, sometimes you miss the boat. Sometimes there's 4 yards to be had and you want to be patient because you're looking for 9 yards. Well, guess what? That 9-yard run may not be here on this particular snap. Sometimes there's something to be said about getting the dirty yards. The 4 yards are there. On 1st and 10, I'd like you to take those 4 yards, all right, and make it 2nd and 6. Much more advantageous down in distance than 2nd and 9 or 2nd and 10. So sometimes he can be too patient. He lacks home run speed. I've stressed this already. The 4.70, it speaks volumes. I don't really need to elaborate on that. Injury history. This is a guy that has had some injury concerns in his career, missed at least 1 game every year of his collegiate career except for 1. That was in 2017, including missing 6 games to knee surgery in 2018. He missed the final 6 games of that season. So this is a guy that has had some injury concerns throughout his career, but when he's been healthy, he's been ultra effective. And also fumbling concerns. And you got 2 backs now on your team in Devin Singletary and now Zach Moss that have an issue with fumbles. Now, he's gotten a little bit better, but he's been pretty consistent throughout his career putting the ball on the carpet. 2 fumbles in 2016, lost both of them. 2 fumbles in 2017, lost both of those. 3 fumbles in 2018, he hit his peak there, only lost 1, and then he lost 1 fumble in 2019, his lone fumble of the season. So if you can get him trending in that direction where he's getting it down to 1 and closer to none, you'll feel good about that. But that's 8 career fumbles in 4 seasons, lost 6 of them. Just something to keep in mind. In terms of AJ Epineza, his player comp for me is Preston Smith. Forgot to give you that. So I see him as a Preston Smith guy. When Preston Smith was drafted by the Redskins coming into the league, there was talk about kicking him inside because of his body type, playing him outside. The Redskins ultimately moved him outside. He took a full year to acclimate and acquiesce to the NFL game before getting his body right because the Redskins played a 3-4 defense and then ended up standing up in a 3-point or in a 2-point stance for the Redskins as an outside 3-4 linebacker. So see a lot of the same traits in AJ Epineza coming into the league as Preston Smith, that versatility to kick inside. Preston Smith did a lot of those same things when he was at Mississippi State. And as you get to Zach Moss, my comp for him is Carlos Hyde, a guy that I've always said, why doesn't anyone want to love Carlos Hyde? He's just looking for a home and someone to love him. Carlos Hyde has been on like 4 different teams the last 4 seasons, whether you're talking about Cleveland, Jacksonville, Kansas City, and now Houston. And I think the Texans didn't re-sign him. Remember, they traded for David Johnson. So now I think Carlos Hyde's on the move yet again. I don't know why no one loves him because Carlos Hyde is a quality NFL back. I see a lot of the same traits in Zach Moss. He can catch it. He's physical. He gets everything that's there. And that's Carlos Hyde. So I really like this selection in the 3rd round, 86th pick overall. Running back out of Utah, Zach Moss for me is a 4, a really physical back that can do a lot of things for you pass game wise, catching it out of the backfield, pass pro, and can run in between the tackles as well. You go to the next selection in this draft for the Buffalo Bills. 4th round, 128th overall selection, wide receiver out of UCF. Gabrielle Davis is the selection. 6'2", 216 pounds, ran a 4.54 40, 72 grabs for 1,241 yards and 12 scores in 12 games in 2019. 152 grabs for 2,447 yards and 23 scores in a 38-game career at UCF for Gabby Davis. Gabe Davis is a guy that I wasn't all that high on, to be honest with you, coming out. But I understand the value in a Gabe Davis. I understand that there's tremendous upside with him. A lot of the things I didn't like was predicated off of the system that he played in. It's not his fault that his coach told him pretty much, hey, you line up pretty much on the sidelines. Like, I hate the college splits because guys are essentially out of bounds. They're standing literally, a foot away from out of bounds. They could literally give one of their teammates standing on the sidelines, a high five, or some dap, and still run their route. It's ridiculous how far to the sideline they're allowed to stand. But he literally stands all the way out there and then just runs a 9-ball. Essentially, that's the route tree for them. The occasional bang 8 on the backside, a post, and then there's a stop route that they intertwine every now and again. But other than that, that's all Gabe Davis did, and then caught wide receiver screens. So not a lot of route tree. I wasn't impressed. I just saw a big physical specimen. But guess what I said the Buffalo Bills need at receiver? A big physical specimen. You got one here. I had him as my 17th wide receiver, and you may think of that as being derogatory. This was a draft where literally there are about 25, 20 to 25, first to third, fourth round selections in here that I saw as viable number 1 or number 2 options in this league. Literally 20 to 25. So if you were in my top 20, that pretty much speaks volumes as to how I felt about you, feeling like you're a legit number 1 or number 2 option in this league more likely than not. So 17 is not a bad number in this particular draft. He was the 18th wide receiver taken, 16 if you take out Antonio Gibson and Lynn Bowden, who both have been classified as running backs by the teams that selected them in the draft. So we'll go with the 16th wide receiver taken. I had him as my 17th. So right around where I thought he would go. I had him as a day 3 selection, 4th round. You take him in the 4th round, so I think that's tremendous value. I'll give you my comp for him later on. But size, at 6'2", 216, he's a big guy. He actually looks bigger than 6'2", 216 on tape. Honestly speaking, you look at him and you look like you're looking at a 6'3", 6'4 guy, but he's 6'2", but he's a big guy. Big frame, got some speed. That 4.54 is legit 4.5. And I honestly think he plays a little faster. He gets on top of guys, big strider, gets on top of guys routinely on tape. So that's something else that I think will translate to the next level. Physicality, he's a big dude, plays physically, whether you're talking about the release at the line of scrimmage or you're talking about fighting for the football down the field. And I think he could be better at that. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But he's a physical guy, run after the catch especially. Speaking of which, run after the catch, that's where you see the physicality on display at its finest with him is run after the catch because he's not a make-you-miss guy. Excuse me, his hands are really solid, really solid hands. You feel good about throwing him the football on 3rd and 7 on a back shoulder fade or a comeback. Things of that nature. Can track the football in the air. That's essentially what he did best at UCF is he went and tracked the football. I mean, look at his catches and look at the amount of yards. That tells you all you need to know. Big chunk plays. That's all they did. Their quarterback, all he essentially did, he was a left-hander, would just drop back 5 yards and let it rip 40, 50 yards down the field, and these guys would just have to go get it. And so he can definitely track the football in the air. And then his production, big time production the last couple of years at UCF, putting up some big time numbers for a team that thought that they should have been a bigger fixture in the playoff mix, but weren't a member of a Power 5 conference, so never really got that opportunity to prove themselves. But he put up some big time numbers the last 2 seasons, and that production cannot be ignored. You look at his weaknesses, needs to be stronger at the point of catch. He's too big to allow guys in his catch space and allow them to knock the football away. I think he just needs to be a little bit stronger at the point of catch. Seems very limited in his route running ability. I've already talked about that. He can get better. That's something he can improve upon. I just don't think that was stressed at UCF because of the offense that they were running. So I'm not going to bang him too bad for that because I understand that there's a level of talent that this guy possesses that I just didn't get to see. You can't fully unlock something if you're not asked to unlock it. So I think you get him in your building, you allow your wide receiver coaches to put their hands on him, and maybe he becomes a much better route runner and pays attention to the details and things that he didn't have to do at UCF. Despite his size, doesn't win enough 50-50 balls. I don't think he's a tremendous athlete, like a guy that's a big-time leaper, goes up, climbs a ladder, puts his nutsack on helmets and things of that nature. I just don't see him doing it. See him as a guy that's more of a tracker of the football, running and catching it over the shoulder than I see him going up and leaping and snatching it out of the air at its highest point, which is what I want from him. But lots of pushing and extending at point of catch on deep balls. I could see him picking up some PIs, some OPIs down the field because he's one of those guys that, instead of him trusting his size and his hands and his ability to go get it himself, He wants to lay hands on the defender to make sure that they don't have a chance to go up and get the football. And I think he's going to end up getting flagged because he's so obvious with it. It's okay to, at the end of the route, at the point of catch, to give a guy a little shoulder, maybe knock him off balance, don't allow him to jump as high as he normally would. Maybe the officials don't see it if you're a little covert with it, but he's so out in the open with his push. He's so blatant. I think he's going to be flagged at the next level. With his frame, I think he can be more physical in the run game. There are times when you watch him on tape, and if the ball's not coming to him, he could give two shits. He takes 3-4 steps off the line of scrimmage. And again, they could be coached to do that at UCF. I don't know what they're being coached to do. They could say, look, our offense is predicated on you guys being able to get vertical. So if the ball's not coming your way or it's a run play away from you, hey, take the play off. We'd much rather you catch your breath, catch your wind, so that on the next snap, we can take it deep and you can run 50 yards down the field, no problem. So I don't know if that's what he's being coached to do. I can tell you, not a ton of effort out there in the run department, not a ton of selling routes when the ball's not coming his way. There are a number of reasons why I wasn't as high on him, but I understand the talent that is Gabe Davis, okay? And I understand that the Bills needed a big receiver, and all of those things kind of meeting and coming to a head makes this a very interesting pick. My comp for him is Michael Floyd out of Notre Dame, played for the Arizona Cardinals, among other teams. His best work was done in Arizona early in his career. If you remember, he was a big-time target for Carson Palmer in Arizona when they had it going with Larry Fitzgerald at the end of Carson Palmer's career. If you can get early career Michael Floyd out of Gabe Davis, you got something here in the 4th round, 128th pick overall, wide receiver out of UCF. Gabe Davis for me is a 4. I like this pick because of what it means for this Buffalo Bills offense. They needed a bigger target. And again, I like Duke Williams. Gabe Davis is different than Duke Williams. He's faster. I think Duke Williams is more physical, maybe even has better hands. But that's not to take away from what Gabe Davis brings to the table. I just thought you needed to add more size. He gives you that, plus a little bit of speed and the ability to run, track the football down the field. And you got a quarterback that can let it rip. I just think this is a good fit for you at this point of the draft. You go to the next selection in this draft for the Buffalo Bills. 5th round, 167th pick overall, quarterback out of Georgia, Jake from State Farm is the pick. Jake Fromm is an interesting case. I knew this could happen to him. I was hoping that it didn't, but at 6'2", 220 pounds, not the biggest guy, doesn't have the biggest arm, and I just thought to myself, either he's going to be seen for what he is, which is a very quality game-managing quarterback that in a pinch, if you need him to start games for you as a backup, will be able to come in and do everything you need him to do. And I said to myself when this pick was made, I said, this is a hell of a pick. The reason I love it so much is because I felt like the Bills lost a game against the New England Patriots last year because they didn't have a quality backup quarterback that could come in and steady the ship and win them a football game that was there for the taking. And I feel like Jake Fromm is the kind of guy that in that same situation, if that were to come up again this next upcoming season, he would be able to step in there and win you a ball game. And so 234 completions, over 385 attempts for a 61 completion percentage, 2,860 yards, 24 touchdowns, 5 interceptions in 14 games for the Georgia Bulldogs in 2019. For his career, 982 attempts, 621 completions, which equals out to a 63% completion percentage, 8,224 yards passing, 78 touchdowns, over 18 INTs in 43 games. So again, not really going to turn the football over. You're essentially talking about a 5-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. That's the way you like it. I had a mid to early 3rd round grade, a mid-second to early 3rd round grade. So I thought he was a day 2 quarterback. But here's the thing. I said either he's going to be looked upon as a guy that can come in and, you know, give you some quality starts if you're kind of trying to figure out your quarterback situation, looking for a bridge quarterback. Maybe he evolves into something a little bit more like an Alex Smith or, or an Andy Dalton or something like that. Or you need a really quality backup and you're a team that feels like they're ready to contend for something meaningful and you don't really have that guy. Well, Jake Fromm's your guy. And, I said either he's going to be viewed as that or just a guy with not enough not enough stuff, not enough talent, not enough size, not enough athleticism, not enough of the things that teams covet at the quarterback position in today's NFL. And it proved to be the latter. And so I had him as my sixth quarterback. And he was the sixth quarterback taken in this draft. So, or seventh, quarterback taken in this draft. And so I'm not surprised by that. I was surprised that, the FIU quarterback went ahead of him in this draft, but that's whatever. Bottom line is, again, like I said with Zach Moss, you or AJ Epineza, you benefit to me from this. Strengths, adequate size, and arm strength. His arm strength, he doesn't have a Chad Pennington pop gun arm, you know what I mean? It's not like he's barely getting a football. It's just not one of those footballs that zips through the air. And, in Buffalo, that could be a little problematic with those winds swirling at Ralph Wilson Stadium sometimes, but he can get the football there. Quick release. I think he knows where the football is supposed to go, and he gets it out very quickly. That's something you like about him. He's extremely smart and intelligent. He gets it, understands what his role is going to be. He did it at Georgia. Remember, at Georgia, they had Jacob Eason. He beat out Jacob Eason 2 years in a row, and it forced Eason to transfer. Like, Jake Fromm gets it, all right? And he's not opposed to competing either. Like, Matt Barkley's there. I wouldn't be shocked if Jake Fromm were to take his job. This isn't the offseason for a young quarterback to come in and take anybody's job, though, with the way things are with the 19. However, had it not been an offseason like this, like none that we've really ever seen, I wouldn't be shocked if he would have beat out Matt Barkley for the backup job right out. Rapid process and progress, P&P as I like to call it. He processes and progresses through his reads quickly and gets the football out. As I talked about him having a quick release, that's because much like a Kirk Cousins, he sees the field, diagnoses it pre-snap, knows what kind of coverage he's getting, knows where the ball needs to go, diagnoses what's going on, and then gets rid of it. Accurate short to intermediate. Did a lot of his damage at Georgia in the short to intermediate game. Didn't really push it down the field as much. And that's fine. That's not really who he is. Excellent caretaker of the football. Again, one of these guys, not going to beat you, not going to make a ton of big-time plays either, but he's not going to lose you football games. All right? Takes care of the football, gives you a shot. Weaknesses, marginal athlete. And I think that's what probably hurt him the most. What we saw in this draft in 2020 with the quarterbacks in particular were the first 5 quarterbacks that were selected, including Jalen Hurts in the second round, the first 4 guys that went in the first round, and then Hurts in the second round. And there weren't any more quarterbacks that went until I believe the 4th round was the next earliest a quarterback went, and that was Jacob Eason to the Colts. You didn't see anybody go outside of the first 2 days of the draft that didn't have athleticism. If you had athleticism, if you could run, extend plays, make things happen off schedule with your athleticism, you got selected in the first 2 rounds if you had some talent. If you had talent, but you couldn't escape the pocket and make things happen under duress with your legs and athleticism, they pushed you down the draft board. Jacob Eason had all the intangibles. Big arm, big strapping NFL body, can make all the throws, but he's not a great athlete. So he got dinged for that and didn't get taken to the 4th round. Same thing with Jake Fromm. Not a big arm, not a big athlete. He got dinged for that. Doesn't extend the play well. That kind of speaks to the marginal athlete that I just mentioned. Not a big-time mover outside the pocket. He can run if need be. You give him space and an opportunity. He can get you, 6 on 3rd and 5, but that's not his forte. More of a game manager than a game winner. That's okay. Not everybody is Patrick Mahomes. Not everybody's built to be Aaron Rodgers or Drew Brees. Some guys are Alex Smith. And that's okay. You need those guys in the league as well. Need supporting cast, skill players and a defense and a running game to win. Not good enough by himself to elevate those around him. That's another reason he got pushed down draft boards. And again, that's okay. You know what I just described in describing Jake Fromm with that last weakness? I just described half of the starting quarterbacks, probably more so 2/3 of the starting quarterbacks in the league. They can't win it on their own. They're not able to elevate the level of play of those around them. Hell, I probably just described 28 of the 32 starting quarterbacks in the league. All right, 27 or 26 of them for sure. So he's not any different. He just lacks some of the skills and attributes that some of the other guys that have had played at a high level in this league have that he just doesn't. But at the end of the day, for me, the comp is Andy Dalton. You know, I see a lot of Andy Dalton. The only difference is Andy Dalton has a bigger arm. Andy Dalton's not a tremendous athlete. Andy Dalton can't win you a game by himself, but you put enough talent around Andy Dalton and he can go out and win you ball games. Not going to really kill you in the turnover department necessarily, but isn't going to make a bunch of big plays. But Andy Dalton's got a bigger arm, so Andy's willing to take risks, throw it down the field, and so there are going to be more interceptions. But I thought he was more of an Andy Dalton type of player, a guy. You know, more people will probably look at him and say he's more Alex Smith than Andy Dalton. He's not the athlete that Alex Smith is and was in his career. And that's why he's not Alex Smith. He's more Andy Dalton to me than Alex Smith. Either way, I think you got yourself a really quality backup quarterback. And as Brandon Beane said, it was just too good of a value to pass up at that point of the draft. I vehemently agree, to the point where in the 5th round, 167th pick overall, quarterback out of Georgia, Jake Fromm, for me, is a 4 for the Buffalo Bills. I just think this is a tremendous pickup and a guy that's going to come in and be able to give you some quality reps if need be. And Josh Allen is a reckless quarterback, as we saw last season, and even into the playoffs with some of the things that he did and some of the ways he puts his body on the line. He's going to miss some games. All right, he's going to miss some games throughout his career. You're going to need someone to step in for him and steady the ship while he's gone. Jake Fromm's the man for the job. As we move on to the next selection in this draft, 6th round, 207th pick overall. Place kicker out of Georgia Southern, Tyler Bass is the selection. 5'10", $185. Again, he's a kicker. Not much here to break down. I'll give you a couple of strengths and a few weaknesses. The interesting thing with this is you already got a couple of kickers on the roster. You got Steven Hauschka. He used to be House Money Hauschka. Not as money as he used to be, but still a quality NFL kicker. You also brought in Kari Vedvik, the guy that had the big leg a couple of years ago in Baltimore. They flipped him for a pick. He hasn't been the same since, but you got some competition in there. Now you're adding another kicker to the mix. So you're really going to allow these kickers to battle it out, and we'll see who comes out on top. You didn't break any rules here. I've only got one rule when it comes to specialists, whether it's a punter, a place kicker, or a long snapper. As long as you don't spend a pick any higher than the 5th round. 5th round or later, got no problems with it. You spent the 6th round pick on him. You didn't break any rules. I have no issues with this selection of Tyler Bass. 93% from the money distance in 2019. My money distance in any league, college, NFL, CFL, doesn't matter, is from 30 to 49 yards. That's the money distance. That's where you're going to kick the vast majority of your field goals. He was kicking from a 93% clip from the money distance. That's what I'm talking about. Kickoffs, specialists, all 4 years at Georgia Southern. So if you're looking for a guy to bang it out of the back of the end zone and force that team to start at the 25-yard line, Tyler Bass is your man. Now, weaknesses. Issues in inclement weather, which doesn't bode well for him being a place kicker in Buffalo. A lot of windy days, a lot of cold and hard footballs to kick, and also some inclement snow type of weather as you get later into the season. So I don't know if he's going to fare well in Buffalo or not. Had a season where he missed 8 kicks. That's way too many kicks for me. He had a year where he went 20 of 28. That's ugly. That's nasty. Not a lot of made kicks past 50 yards. That's also a red flag for me. In a day and age where NFL kickers are booming it from damn near 60, I need my kicker to be comfortable banging home a 51, 52 yarder with no problem. And then if I need him in a pinch, game on the line, 55, 56, I need to know that this guy can comfortably, or at least not necessarily comfortably. I don't really care if you don't have much to spare. If you get it over that crossbar in between the uprights, that's all I care about. I need to know you can do that. He showed the ability to do that at the Senior Bowl, but guess what? That was with no pressure on him. That was with no one rushing after him. That wasn't with pressure on the line. Now, he did have 2 game-winning kicks in back-to-back years in his team's bowl game, so he knows how to get it done with the pressure being on, but those weren't from 50+. So anyway, 6th round, 207th pick overall, place kicker out of Georgia Southern, Tyler Bass for me is a 2. You didn't break any rules. You didn't do anything wrong. I don't have any problems with the pick. You add him into the mix, he will provide competition. You go to the 6th round once again, 207th pick overall, wide receiver out of Oregon State, Isaiah Hodgins is the selection for me. 6'4", 210 pounds, ran a 4.61 40. If you've watched any of my draft videos, you know how smitten I was with Isaiah Hodgins throughout this process. I think you're absolutely getting a steal. And to me, he's better than Gabe Davis right now. You know, you put these two on the field right now, he's better. Gabe Davis has more talent than Isaiah Hodgins from a standpoint of speed, measurables, and that kind of thing. But, you know, this guy's 6'4", 210. You know, Gabe Davis is 6'2", 212. But Gabe Davis is a little bit faster, but I think Isaiah Hodgins is the better player, frankly, and flat out. But 86 grabs for 1,171 yards and 13 scores in 12 games. 176 grabs for 2,322 yards, 20 scores in 34 games. Keep in mind that this guy played at Oregon State. They are terrible. Have been for the last 5 or 6 seasons. Oregon State has been one of the worst teams in the Pac-12 routinely year in, year out. They'll win 1 or 2 games in the Pac-12 and win 3 or 4 overall for the season. They stink. The quarterback position has been garbage as well. And this guy is the main attraction for them. And so the other team knows, they go into the game saying, hey, we got to stop Isaiah Hodgins. You know, everybody else can get off. Just don't let it be Isaiah Hodgins. And he's still putting up big boy numbers. So I love that about Isaiah Hodgins. I had a late day 2, 3rd round, early day 3, 4th round pick. For you to get him in the 6th round, I think it's highway robbery. And I had him as my 15th rated wide receiver in this draft. And he was the 31st receiver taken. At 29th, if you take out Antonio Gibson and Lynn Bowden, who were both classified as running backs by the teams that selected them. So to me, this is one of the biggest value picks of the entire draft. I'll give you my comp for him a little bit later on. But length and size are the first things that stick out to me. He's a big guy. You see it on tape. Body control is the next thing. Man, I love the way this guy's able to contort his body and make the quarterback right. You know, whether he's got to leave his feet, extend his arms, go up and climb the ladder. He's got to reach behind him. He's got to go down and dig one out of the turf. His body control is impeccable. And it's a big part of the reason why I think this guy has a chance to be a big-time contributor at the next level. Excellent hands. I went on record as saying that, to me, he's got some of the best hands in this draft, irregardless of position. He just doesn't drop the football. He just doesn't. I mean, ball is like he's got stickum on his gloves. This guy just catches everything, man. Love his hands. I think he's got better hands than Gabe Davis. Just saying. Catch radius, it's better than Gabe Davis's. I don't want to keep comparing him to Gabe Davis, but, you know, if you would have spent this pick on Isaiah Hodgins and Gabe Davis, or spent this pick on Gabe Davis or somebody else and spent this 4th rounder on Isaiah Hodgins, I might have given you a 5. You know, but no, I wouldn't have given you a 5. But I just felt like this guy should have went earlier in the draft. Catch radius is ridiculous, off the charts. Uses his frame to shield defenders. Knows how to use his body to box guys out so that they don't have a play on the football. That's what you do when you're a big 6'4", 6'5", receiver, 6'3". You got a big body, use it. You know, these corners are 5'10", 5'11", 6 feet. You got an advantage. Use it. Use it. Catching in traffic, you know, this is one of those guys that, you know, caught the football in heavy traffic. He had to at times. He's not the quickest guy, not separating at a high level at times. And so, you know, corners are draped all over him. Doesn't matter. He's coming down with the football. Red zone threat, you know, this is a guy that just made plays at Oregon State, you know, and like I said, they didn't have a ton of talent on their football team, and yet he was a guy that just continued to produce. And when they needed him most in the red zone, he was a guy that produced for them. Production, again, big-time production at a school where not a lot of talent is coming out of there. So you got to acknowledge that. You got to acknowledge what's around him, and you got to acknowledge the fact that this guy put up some big-time numbers. He competes as a blocker. Again, Gabe Davis didn't give you any of that. And I know I got to stop doing that, but I just liked him better than Gabe Davis. And so he competes as a blocker, gives you something there. And then he's got NFL bloodlines. His dad played in the league and was an ex-fullback for the Rams. And so he's got that coursing through his veins as well. Weaknesses, speed. Obviously at 4.61, not his biggest attribute. And so that's okay. That's not what he is. He's a big body, big frame wide receiver that has tremendous hands that will go and get the football for you. Wasn't asked to run an array of routes. Much like Gabe Davis earlier in the draft, Wasn't asked to run the full gamut of the route tree. He ran more routes than Gabe Davis, but he didn't run the full extent of the passing tree, and that's okay. The route tree, that's okay. That's okay. He can learn how to do that. Will have trouble separating with quickness. I think he'll have trouble separating in general at the next level. And again, that's okay, because a wise man told me about 3 years ago. He said it's a new day and age in the NFL. Once upon a time, you only separated via two ways: speed. That's better. Okay, that first one was a little kind of iffy. I didn't know if I wanted to do it or not. Or you separate with quickness. Well, he has neither. So, there's a new way to separate now. And it came about 4 or 5 years ago. And that's with size. Now you can box guys out and win on a back shoulder fade. Now you can run a route and just use your body to shield a defender and win. Quarterbacks can throw it to you 30 yards down the field in one-on-one coverage. And because you are 4 inches taller and can go and get the football with strong hands, you can win. And so guys can separate with size now. Michael Thomas is a great example of that right now. He separates with size. He's not the quickest guy. He's not the fastest receiver, but he's physical, and he separates with size. Has to get stronger and fill out his frame. He looks thin. When you see him, he looks like a malnourished wide receiver for his size. He could put on a little bit more weight, and I think he will. Get into Bill's strength and conditioning program. Get him in a nutrition program as well. I think he'll put on another 5 to 7 pounds, start to fill out that frame a bit more, and I think he'll be a big-time producer for you. I really do. I love this pick. I like it more than the Gabe Davis pick, to be honest with you. Oregon State versus Oklahoma State. If you want to see the best of Isaiah Hodgins, you want to know what you're getting, go watch Isaiah Hodgins versus Oklahoma State. That'll give you everything you need and then some. So in the 6th round, 207th pick overall, wide receiver out of Oregon State, Isaiah Hodgins for me is a 4, man. It's a good selection, good value at this point of the draft. I might be overselling him a bit, but I just feel really good about him. That's the way I feel. No one's going to make me feel any different, and I think the Bills got tremendous value. And I love the fact that you doubled up on wide receiver, but not just any wide receiver, big wide receivers. You've got plenty of smaller guys. Adding in, the big-time playmaker from Minnesota in Stefon Diggs. You already had John Ross. You already had John Brown, and you already had Cole Beasley. You had enough smaller receivers. I know you had Duke Williams. I like Duke Williams, but I thought you could upgrade with bigger guys. And going and getting not one but 2 of them. I'm gonna throw 2 darts at the board. One of these is bound to stick, right? I love it. Love it, love it, love it. That's why I love Brandon Beane. And we finally wrap up this draft in the 7th round with the final pick of this Bills draft. 239th overall selection, cornerback out of Pitt. Dane Jackson is the selection, 6 feet, 187 pounds, ran a 4.57 40, 3 tackles for loss, half a sack, 12 pass breakups, 1 interception in 13 games for his career. That was in 2019 for his career. 9 tackles for loss, sack and a half, 4 forced fumbles, 39 pass breakups, 4 INTs, and 1 pick six in 50 games. I had a late day 3 grade on Dane Jackson, 6th or 7th round. I thought you were fine either way there. Tremendous fluidity and movement skills is the first thing that jumped off the screen at me. When I watched him, I said, man, this guy moves really well, gets out of his back pedal, turns and has that sideways shuffle. His transitions are really clean and fluid. It allows him to stay in phase down the field. So that's the first thing that I saw when I was watching Dane Jackson. Willing tackler. He does not wrap up, and we'll talk about that later on, but he's willing to throw his shoulder in the mix and try to get guys on the ground. I can respect that. There is a level of physicality that he's willing to put forth as a corner in the tackling department. Plant and drive. He can test just about everything underneath, whether he's in zone. And a lot of times when guys are playing off in zone, they'll give up the underneath stuff. But when you can plant and drive, you even contest those. You see it, you identify it quickly, you're able to stick your foot in the ground and drive back towards the football and make plays. And the 39 pass breakups kind of speak towards that. Like, nothing's free, nothing's cheap and easy. No free meals underneath against Dane Jackson. You're going to have to pay for everything. No free lunches around here, man. You want to eat, you're going to have to pay. And he makes you work for it. LLC properties, I always talk about that. That's one of the first things I look for in a cornerback. Yeah, it's nice if you can run. Great if you're willing to tackle. But you know what I'm looking for? Do you look back for the football? Do you look? Can you locate and then contest the ball? If you don't look back for the ball, then you can't locate the football. If you can't locate the football, how are you going to pick it off? You might be able to swipe at a guy's arms when the ball gets there, maybe dislodge it and knock it free, and that's great. But I want the turnover. I'm looking for you to produce the football and shorten the field for the offense. Can you do that if you're not looking for the football? No, you can't. So it limits your ceiling as a player in this league if you don't have LLC properties. Dane Jackson does. Very comfortable in press and bail. To me, he's at his best in press and bail. Comes up, looks like he's about to lay hands on that receiver at the snap of the football, bails, kind of keys quarterback's eyes, keeps the receiver in front of him, and then reacts to whatever the receiver does. If that receiver runs a out-breaking route or a route breaking back towards the quarterback, he sticks his foot in the ground and drives, and that's where that plant and drive comes into play. So very comfortable from press and bail, and that's his best way of keeping everything in front of him because, as I mentioned, not elite end speed, so you don't want to allow receivers to get on top of you. Gets his hands on a ton of footballs. I think that kind of goes without saying. The 39 pass breakups kind of speak for themselves. So this is a guy always around the action, getting his hands on footballs, and that usually bodes well for a cornerback. It doesn't matter where you are, college or pro game. Weaknesses: lacks elite vertical speed. The 4.57 is what it is. Recovery speed is a concern. When you don't have elite speed to begin with, and you don't have elite length, he's got 30-inch arms, it's hard for you to get back into plays when you fall out of phase, when you're a step or two behind that receiver. And so for Dane Jackson, it's in his best interest to just keep everything in front of him. And you kind of saw that from him on tape, is him, a guy really just looking to press and bail and get out of there and make sure nobody gets on top of him. Willing to hit, but usually doesn't wrap up. Again, That's a technique thing that can be taught, but he does not wrap up very often. I'd like to see him be better in that department. There was a run I'm watching him against Clemson in 2018, and Trevor Lawrence comes out there on a run, and Dane Jackson ducks his head, throws a shoulder at him, and just absolutely whiffs. Didn't see what he was hitting, didn't bother to try to wrap up, and Trevor Lawrence just did a nice Olay sidestep and ran for another 11 yards down the sideline. And I'm saying, dude, you could have stopped that for a 4-yard gain instead of turned into an 18-yard run. Come on, So I just want him to be better in that department. And doesn't mirror as well for a guy with his fluidity. I think that's another reason why he just goes press and bail, is because when he's in strictly man-to-man, when a guy gives him some moves, maybe they go outside first, back inside, right off the line of scrimmage, he's all over the place. He's turning around. He's flipping his hips. He's all over the place. And now he's out of phase. And now that guy's got to step on him. And so I think to just eliminate all of that, he just goes with the press and bail technique. And so we'll see if he's able to do a better job of mirroring at the NFL level. But this is a solid pick, man. A really quality NFL caliber corner you get in the 7th round that'll come in and I think really play well for you. And what Sean McDermott teaches and what those guys are able to get out of their corners, whether it's a Levi Wallace or EJ Gaines over the years, like whatever, whether the case may be, anybody, it seems like they get the most out of their corners, which is why I think Josh Norman's actually going to come in and play well for you. I think Dane Jackson's going to do much of the same. And so here in the 7th round, 239th pick overall, cornerback out of Pitt, Dane Jackson for me is a triple, a 3. I think it's a nice finish to what was an extraordinary draft by the Buffalo Bills. And so you look at what they were able to accomplish. Brandon Beane, he did it again. All he's done since he's come to Buffalo is stack positive draft, an impactful draft on top of impactful draft, to the point now where I get it, Brady's no longer in New England, but the Bills are now the odds-on favorite to win the AFC East. When's the last time you've been able to say that? And I get it. Brady's been there for 2 decades. That's the reason you haven't been able to say that. But still, even if Brady were in New England this year, I think the Bills would have been in that conversation anyhow. So I think this was a strong draft. And when you tally it up, it's a 3.71 for the Buffalo Bills, which amounts to a B+. So like I said, another extraordinary draft for Brandon Beane and company in Buffalo. If you want the breakdown of the grading rubric and how the Bills came up with that score, down in the description of this video is where you will find it. I'm your man, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. If it's not your man, T, it's not. I repeat, not the best NFL coverage it could be. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the Louie T Network for more great content. And while you're there, turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. And if you want to stay abreast of what's going on here on the Louie T Network, the best way to do that outside of the notification bell on YouTube is to also follow me on social media, Twitter, at Louie T Network on Twitter. On IG, Louie T Network _ is the IG handle. That's Louie T Network _ So all of that can be found in the description as well of this video. But in any event, thank you for joining me. Take care of yourself. We'll reconvene at a later date and time, talk about this Bills team and what the prospects for them in 2020 and moving forward are. And so look forward to chopping it up with you in the future. Take care of yourself and have a good one. Thanks again for watching.